Namaste. Today's lesson is a very interesting session because, as I previously mentioned, that the focus of these sessions is not emphasizing the kings and queens and their wealth and their pastimes or anything like that, or even their bravery or not much of that. So, of course, that is in the background. The sequence and chronology and epochal events all are mentioned. But the main focus is that while those events at a political or geopolitical level were happening, there was a civilization which was marching ahead. And that civilization aspect, they have never been highlighted at all, in spite of the fact that there is ample evidence both in literature and in architect, eh, almost everywhere. Still, those things are oblique, kind of sidelined. So if mentioned, it is mentioned in a very, casual or negative way. So I'm going to build up the most important thing that happened, and I'll highlight its importance and the impact of that. We will also talk about the invasion of Alexander because that happened at the same time. And we'll mention the geopolitical landscape. What was happening in Europe at that time? How advanced was that? What was happening in rest of the places as far as philosophic thought is concerned, or metaphysical thought is concerned, or even creativity is concerned? So we build in that context. And also in the light of the uh, creativity and the political science that developed in that particular time uh, as a separate subject, very comprehensive, and that is what I'm going to highlight, and its relevance today. So it is a global perspective, and it is also relevance building past to present and what we can learn from that. Having said that, we'll go through the brief history of what was going on during the Nanda Empire. The last one we talked about was the Shishunaga and Ajatashatru. And what did they do? So, and there was a slight tussle at that time at the political level, between those who wanted the king to go the Buddhist way or remain as a Vedic proponent. But the king at that time decided not to do either. He liked the Buddhist philosophy, but he did not want to separate one from the other because one is the offshoot of Sanatana Dharma. So Nandas created the largest state of Magad, central Ganga Valley. They used conquest, diplomacy, and matrimonial alliances. So these were usually the ways to expand the empires, and this is happening, forever. So historical roots go back farther back, push their boundaries up to the north other than their mountain. Now, if we say that Magad was the empire of India, that's not true. There were several other countries on the periphery, below Vindhya Mountains, and in the east. So they had powerful allies. Now, allies are very important because this is the role of the allies we are going to talk. So neighboring kingdoms of Kashi and Nepal, they were their allies, and they have been their allies from Mahabharata time. The relations with other republics and Mahajanpada, they were cordial. But again, You could never count on them. All you could do is that the allies, they really are not playing any underhand game. In other words, what we call these days covert operations. So kingdoms of northwest subcontinent, they were there, several of them. There was Ambi, which was actually Gandhar, Takshila, and there was Porus, Kekaya, and then there was Madras and the Araths and the Vailika. I'll show the map. The Nanda ruled for about 150 years, and the last one, Dhanananda, he was overthrown by Chandragupta Maurya. So this is a brief history or scenario of that time. This is the map, not a good one. A scholar gave me this map. Probably he did it hand drawn, and resolution is very poor. So this is Nepal, even though these boundaries should not have been shown. This boundary should not have been shown. Why? Because these are the political boundaries of today's India. You see, this Bangladesh and Nepal separate and uh, Pakistan separate. You know, that nonsense should not have been there. So probably next time I will create my own map. So this is where Takshila is, Gandhar. And this is where Kekaya is. This is Valhika, uh, which we today call Balak. And then there is my, yeah, this is Bain Magad, and this is here, Sindh and Arat, and all of the Afghanistan area was there. And that should have been in the map as well. But as I said, this is the best I could do at that time. So you see, this is the original. Patliputra was made when Gautam Buddha was there. It is on the uh, Sangam, a confluence of Ganga and Son River. So, and this is where they had the major fort. And they thought that since they're protected, the capital is protected from two sides from the water with water, and if we have proper gates, and then we are safe. So two sides of water to the water, and only a gate here. They were wrong. Okay. So now, having said that, we'll come back to it again and again, um, because this is where Alexander came, and this is where the he crossed Indus River, and then this is Jhelum, and this is where the right where Takshila is. That is where the battle took place. Now, why that Dhananand was unpopular and why he had to be overthrown and why he could not be involved as a mighty empire at that time in defeating Alexander, because he started ruling as a despot. Despot is my will is the will of the whole world. I mean, it's a divine will kind of thing. I can do anything. There are plenty of despots, even in today's world, more so. So he raised taxes on ordinary items, which people did not like. King started stealing the treasury. This is a key one in the sense that one of the Brahmin teacher, Chanak, he saw him stealing. And that is why I had to highlight this point. That as he was stealing and putting them in his own chariot, some coins started falling, gold coins. They used to call it Shakpana, the gold currency at that time. So his advisors and minister covered it up, but Chanak was an eyewitness, and he could not be he was silent and witnessed, but the king also saw that he was a witness. That is why he was a very imminent threat. So king's action, revenge, imprisonment, and Chanakya was imprisoned. His wife died in poverty. He also declared, one of the punishment at that time was that since the Brahmins lived on the charity from door to door, the king declared that nobody will give charity to his wife or his son Vishnugupta. So now, if there is no money coming, and at that time the teachers were not given any salary by anybody, they lived only on charity. So this forced Vishnugupta to leave that kingdom. And he said that I will only enter this kingdom when I have defeated this corrupt regime. The chief minister, the chief of the army, and they were all loyal supporters for their own sake. Some genuinely believed that the king was not doing anything wrong, and some were bound to be loyal. So advisors and administrators for Mauryas for 40 plus years. Who was Vishnugupta? Now the point is, who was Vishnugupta as a student? And the rest of the session is only going to discuss most of what he created and how he shaped the entire political philosophy, political thought, and combined economic system, and administration, and policy matters, and philosophy, and dharma. All of them are combined in a less than 100 pages. Just as Panini's Ashtadhyayi is very condensed, but it takes years to understand. Similarly, Arthashastra that he wrote, again, he called it economic science, Arthashastra, but actually it was political economics or eco-political system. So he was advisor and administrator for Maurya for 40 years after Dhananand was defeated. Before that, as a student, he walked all the way with the caravans and reached Takshila. At that time, that was the most renowned university. He joined there as a student, and in 10, 12 years, he was a teacher there. So um, it was a hard thing for him as a 10 years old child to take such a decision. But he was a very dedicated person and very hardworking and very shrewd. Now we come to Alexander, the Prince of Macedonia. Who was Alexander? Something we have to understand who was Alexander actually. Because the history book says Alexander the Great, who declared his greatness or gave him that title, and what did he do to deserve being great? You see, it was not a self-assigned thing. Somebody decided to make him great in the eyes of the world. So, who was Alexander? He was the Prince of Macedonia. Macedonia is one of the tiny, tiny city in Greece. Greece itself is hardly the size of Punjab, the joint Punjab. And there were several city-states. They called it states. And they were always fighting with each other. Macedonia was one, Sparta was another, Troy was another. So there were several small, small states warring with each other. So it never was a Greek empire. You see, this is a thing that we have to get rid of from the books and most especially from our mind. There never was a Greek empire. There couldn't be. These are cities. So it is like saying that Gurgaon and Faridabad together and Delhi, they're contiguous and they are a empire. Now, Taxila had a vantage point at the crossroads of power politics in Gandhar and Kakaiya. Crossroad of power politics, which means that there were exchanges as allies. There were times when Kakaiya was overlord of Gandhar, and there were times when Gandhar was Ambi, the name of the king. He was overlord of Kakaiya. So between these two people, power politics was continuing. Takshila was also the place, crossroad, not only of power politics, but exchange of students. It was the largest university of that time. 1200 BC it started because recently lower levels of excavation, they have come to light. Not because people were digging for it, but because of the earthquakes, the lowermost, at least up to now, foundations are found. And carbon dating them, they say it is about 1200 before Christ. So when Chanakya was there, it was a flourishing university where people from China and other places, they used to come. It was also crossroad of trade fairs. Gandhar was famous for trade fairs. People from Mitanni and Samaria and Turkey, they used to bring their stuff and exchange. So it was a vantage point, very important place. So Alexander's ambitions and invasions. So how did he turn towards invading, being a young prince? He was about 16, 17 years old, and Aristotle was his teacher. And when Aristotle saw that the prince is a dumb person, he is not applying his brains, he is no good in math, and he had no inclination for learning languages, especially at that time. Latin was emerging as a Western side of Europe. So Aristotle suggested to him one of those days when he was totally baffled by his inability to understand concept. Aristotle said that now what you can do is finish these study session and go and invade the world. He said it casually, jokingly, but Alexander took it literally. It became his ambition to conquer the world and invade other people. And that is what he did. So this is just the background, what was the so-called Greek Empire and what is the greatness of Alexander. So war between Alexander and Porus, everybody has seen many times in pictures also. Um, So he crossed. Actually, whenever there are foreign invasions, part of the reason India lost was because the border kingdoms they betrayed. In this case, Ambi not only from Gandhar, Ambi not only welcomed Alexander, entertained him, put him up in a guest house and as if he's a long lost friend. So together, naturally, Ambi knew the terrain very well, and he said that when Jhelum is in swell, that is the time to cross uh, the river and fight. So they found the day it was raining, and Porus never understood that anybody could take a chance in such a bad weather. And there are advantages and disadvantages from the Indian standpoint. What was the composition or arrangement of their armies? And what was the Western world? Obviously, in Europe, elephants were not there, nor did they participate in, they were not there. Okay. So, horses came from Arab and Central Asia, and that's all they had. So, elephant is a very powerful vehicle in the sense that carry the commander in chief or whoever. But it can be very dangerous. Its feet can get stuck in the mud and it won't move. And even if a small little a needle prick or an arrow is shot, he will simply stand still. So that is his vulnerability. A, mobility is poor, and B, once it gets stuck, there's no way it will move. And it was very muddy. So in the middle of the night, they say Alexander invaded and Porus was there. Nobody else, none of his vassals were there. So he his elephant got stuck and he got down and accepted defeat. Just like that without fighting. So at that point, Alexander declared himself the king of Kekia, but he also announced, Porus announced, that all my vassal kingdoms will be paying tribute to Alexander. Indian minds sometimes are become so philosophic and they do not know the intricacies of how to run a country. You see, it's not dharma. It is, there are more things. So, to understand Rajadharma, to this day, Indians have not understood what is Rajadharma, except when Narendra Modi came. Prior to that, 75 years, or even before 1000 of the present era, they did not understand this point, that what is Rajadharma and where does it become bloody and where does it have to be like non-violent. So, in the middle of the war, you cannot be denouncing violence. Otherwise, also, you cannot disband your armies. So, these are the kind of thing. So there was a disarray in kingdoms and republics. And I think I should go back and show the map. Yeah. These are the kingdoms. See, up to Ravi and Bias, these are the different kingdoms, Madras and Shudrakas and Raj, all of these kingdoms. All of them became the vassals of Alexander. So Alexander did come up to Ravi unopposed because they were vassal kingdoms. So this is the cruel joke of Indian history, that if you have lost the war, why do you pledge the independence of other kingdoms to a foreigner invader? Where is the justification for that? And who says they are under you now? Actually, Alexander did not win any battle except the one in Gandhar. That's the only battle he won. All others, they say that he won right up to Ravi. That's wrong. He never won any battle. In fact, wherever he went on his horse, people made fun of him. One of the few Brahmins, uh, they said, without saying a word, they motioned that you are making a big empire, thinking that you will own everything. In the end, you will need only this much space. So, I mean, without saying a word, they explained. And one of the things that happened again was that this was an enemy who attacked innocent farmers and women and children, which was not done before. So this was an eye opener for Vishnu Gupta, especially, who saw this happening. That people who are not participating in the war, they are doing their own jobs. Manufacturers are doing theirs, skilled workers, traders. So why are they being harmed? We realize this is a new type of enemy that India has to, Bharat has to deal with. And it has to have some central power which will make some kind of alliances all over. So Alexander's invasion is a epical event in the sense that it changed the perspective of war. It brought in kutniti, diplomacy, how to use that. And it brought the perspective where political philosophy says something else, and the realities on the ground, they are saying something else. So we see this map and try to understand. And Vishnugupta came here. Alexander was still in this area. He came to Dhananand and he said that you, being the largest empire in this area, please control, make allies, and make sure that Alexander doesn't come here. And Dhananand and all those, people not realizing what is happening there or what kind of enemy we are talking about. He said, it's not my business. I am happy. Nobody is coming here. Let them deal with it. So now you understand the pointers of history are that what we were, what Indian mind, the way it worked 2000 years back, it works the same way today. You see, where we have to be careful, diplomatic, even crooks. Suddenly we talk about Gandhi and some kind of nonsense like that. And similarly, when it comes to action, and they become blind or pretend to be blind. We don't see anything, or it doesn't exist. So, denial. And that mode of thinking is still part of Hindu mindset and part of the personality makeup. So, we either deny or, you know, just get think that the problem doesn't exist anyway. So now we come to this brought us here. This reigned the kingdoms and republics. You see, now the kingdoms, they are small kingdoms, and since they were protected by Kekaya, therefore they did not have their own army. If they had, it was just small bands, um, partly police. Police was called Kantakshodan. Anybody who is a obstruction in the administration, he should be removed. So they had their contextuals and armies, but nucleus of power was missing. This is what he wanted, that in the new reality, people who are coming from Yavanas, they call them Yavan, and they call them Malech. Uh, and those have no warfare rules. They are not fighting Dharma war or Dharma Yudh. So need for Swarashtra. This is the he introduced. It was there in Upanishad. It was there in some of the Shastras. But by and large, he used the word. And when Dhananand said that you are not even the subject of Magad, why are you here? You should not be even here. He said, I am the son of Bharat, which is a Rashtra, which is bigger than you, bigger than kingdom. That is the first time he used. And he understood the need for a central power and how we define our relations with our own motherland, Savrashtra. Even today, uh, there are plenty of fools and idiots who go abroad and say that India is a amalgamation or a loose confederation of kingdoms. I mean, these are people who represent India and it becomes a buzzword immediately in the academic circles. So we should be very careful that anybody who has the capacity to speak, they will speak. And you cannot stop them from speaking. At least they should not be allowed to leave their country and go there and do damage to the image of the country or even the existence of the country. So Chanak's role is in unifying Bharat. So that is why. So one of that his contribution was A, to awaken the people that this is a different kind of animal. He has no warfare rules. B, that India is a sub-rashtra and there are kingdoms under that, just like small provinces. And the third thing he said that Bharat should be united as an empire. You see, now all these are central power, nucleus of power. So in a way, he put the seed of united Bharat with a central power. So Taxila, where the idea of nation state germinated. Taxila is where the state idea of the nation, Rashtra means nation, nationhood germinated. How did it happen? Because Gandhar was a place where from every kingdom students came. So then they did not owe the allegiance to their own parent native kingdom. They showed allegiance to the common entity which is Bharat, and Takshila was the University of Bharat. It was not the University of Gandhar. It was not for the students of Gandhar. It was a place of learning for everybody who ever comes from wherever. So the nation state, because all the students, they figured out that here is a common enemy invading us, and we are all coming from different kingdoms. We should be together to thwart that enemy or defeat him. So now Chanakya's priorities. From here comes the greatest book which combines political philosophy, which is considered a separate subject, political science, and rules of foreign relations, implementation and administration, and the whole thing. So, what are the priorities of Chanakya? He said the strength, safety, security of the central government, Magad, with its capital, Patliputra. So, if this is the largest empire, and geographically it is somewhere in the middle of the country, not at the periphery, so this should be the center of the nucleus of the empire or the Rashtra, and the well-being, safety, and contentment of the people. That everybody says democracy. And everybody swears on well-being of the people, safety. Right there and then they are violating, they are doing the safety and contentment of their own self. Now, a capable head of the state that could ensure clean administration. So he wanted that the head of the state should be clean. If he is not clean, he cannot demand that the lower cadres will be clean. So corruption comes down. If those who are covering the king's corruption, it percolates down, they can be corrupt also and get away with it. And down there. So, just as in the last 75 years, in some parts, even today in India, the corruption started from the minister, percolated down, 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 right to the orderly, where the orderly would actually loudly demand from the client that, hey, give us something to. Why he could do that? Because he knew, let the officer listen, that you are corrupt and we can also. And instill in the minds of the clients that you have bribed the upper echelon, you can bribe me too, just to keep quiet. So you see, it has a blackmailing kind of effect. It is a cancer that spreads everywhere. And in India, it has spread. Narendra Modi could do so much as central power, you see. So building past to present, the link, we can learn many things from history. If it is taught not as the bravery of so and so and the weakness or how many women were in their harem, was there bigamy or polygamy, and nonsensical things, irrelevant. So then there was a Mantri Parishad, and that Mantri Parishad meant they were called Amatyas, Mantris were called. And they were the Senapati, the commander in chief, and then there was chief minister, and then there treasury minister, and then there was police department, and then there was espionage, and then there were those who took care of the large businesses. Then there was a department for small businesses. It was an elaborate system of bureaucratic uh, state. So, for that kind of layout, where you are raising elaborate framework of rule and solidity of the empire, and also make it cohesive enough that they could listen to uh, the empire's the emperor. So, and everybody should be loyal. But at the same time, Chanakya said that if the king is a despot, we have a right to get rid of him. So this is very interesting. So he says that with all given all these kind of elaborate system of bureaucracy and structure and this and that, what is we need? What is it we need? Revenue and abundance of treasury. If the treasury is leaking, like it was, during Nehru's dynasty, it was leaking with all those ghotalas and nonsensical things. giving away chunks of land to China, to here and there, treasury was leaking. Empire was being weaker. So this is a very interesting, and it is not even in Arthashastra. That is why I could even make it simple, because this is there is another other books. One is Laghu Chanakya, small messages through a story. Then there is Sutra Niti by Chanakya. And then, of course, the book Arthashastra. So he says, Sukhasya Moolam Dharma. What is the origin of Dharma? Or what can sustain Dharma? Moolam is pillar. So what can sustain Dharma? First, what can sustain Sukh? How can you be comfortable? So people can be happy only when there is Dharma. So the origin or pillar of comfortable life is Dharma. Dharmasya moolam artha. So what is the pillar that sustains Dharma? That is earth, revenue. Arthasya moolam rajya. Now, course, it has to have some pillar. So, what is a pillar? To keep the treasury um, solid and uh, large. It's a Rajya. You have to have a strong king. And Rajya Moolam Indriya. This is an important thing. How can you sustain a kingdom over a long period of time if the king is Indrajya? That means he is not corrupt, he is not greedy, he has no personal interest or no conflict of personal interest. He does not owe anything to the foreign governments, or who is not indebted to any foreign kingdom. All of these, the personal issues, and he is not swayed by arrogance. You see, that is one thing. You do what you need to do, but at the same time, you're doing it because it needs to be done. Okay. So, two premises of Chanakya's entire treatise: nation state and not city state. The power play of the nation state, modern word for the smaller kingdom or provinces, covers the entire subcontinent and empire. Who is the emperor among several kingdoms? And his definition is Narendra Vijigishu, is the coordinator. If there are all the kingdoms, what kind of king should be there? And he says Narendra, the best among men. Surprisingly, we have a Narendra now, and in the last century, we had Narendra Vivekananda. So it's a auspicious name for India. Raj Dharma aimed to govern for providing welfare. Real politic was self-centric expansionist. Real. In the minds of everybody was that we have to expand and protect the boundaries. So now there is a clash. If you are working for the welfare of the subjects, then real politics cannot be self-centric and expansionist, because Indriya Jaya means he is not self-centric. Where the self-centric comes, that self-centric means as an empire, as the entire nation, that is nationalist. But other than that, it is not that I am the greatest person and I can do anything, feed the people to the lions or to the tigers, that kind of thing. So that kind of king will not work. That is undemocratic. So it is necessary for now this is in the European context. Machiavelli wrote this. I read it cover to cover because in India, instead of making us read Arthashastra as a training, administrator administrative training, they made us read Machiavelli. So in the Prince, that's the name of the book. How to be a great hypocrite and dissembler. Then he keep dividing piece by piece, atom by atom. For men are so simple and yield so much to immediate necessity that the deceiver will never lack dupes. You see, people are dupes, they can be deceived, and the king should be deceiver. In other words, it is exactly the opposite of that. This is the book being taught in the National Administrative Academy at that time. I am, I think, this is 60 years ago, 50 years. So Kautilya's Raj Dharma centered on people's welfare, not on the king's and fooling people. So questionable means bad choices, they are necessary even, or they are justified. There is another question now that if this is people's welfare, then use of questionable means or choices which are inherently evil, do these jeopardize noble ends? So that is a question, that comes to mind. In my mind, it is a ticklish question. Depends on the circumstances. Just like Yudhishthir didn't want to tell a lie, so he still said Ashwatthama Hade. And Shri Krishna knew that he is not going to tell the lie, and he blew the shank. So for the noble ends, he used that, drowned his voice. So it means, where you have to be a crook, outmaneuver other person. Chess is not a game of where you do not kill anybody, the opponent. It's a game to win. So sometimes ends you have to do something, or the other. So policy, foreign policy and security issues, sphere of influence and protectorate. This is another thing. That in the center is the emperor, and then he has a sphere of influences. Around him are allies. Around him, those allies are the protectorates, vassal kingdoms. Then they have treaties with them. Then there are countries which can be at war sometimes and at peace sometimes. Those are satellite countries. These are very contemporary ideas. The satellite countries, sphere of influence, protectorates, these are 19th century ideas. This is a 20th century idea. You see, sphere of influence is very modern idea being used now. So temporary treaties with indifferent or openly hostile kingdoms, that's fine. You pretend that you are not noticing that they are undermining you, but wait for the right time. And this is the main rule foreign policy, four pillars of foreign policy. Sam means that all of them are, friendly. So be friendly with everybody. Make allies, like Modi is doing, going everywhere and hugging and believing that we are all human beings and friends, allies. So Sam is equal allies. Dam is we exchange gifts. You give me this, I give that, exchange. Blade is when these things don't work, then create a conflict between the allies. If you think that some of the allies are not satisfied with your rule, then what you do? You create a conflict. And Dand is the ultimate issue of war. So you exhaust this option, you exhaust this option, then you exhaust this option. And then in this option, you have weakened the allies or who could join the enemy. So that. Now, in the light of this, one can really spend half an hour to understand the foreign policy of America. They are creating this, they are creating this, and NATO alliances. And then right away, they are ruthless. And they forget about this and this and this, and they jump into war without even thinking twice what would be the end. Chanakya says when you take a irrevocable action, which you cannot take back, you should always have that the door you entered, that there is a door to exit. Now Trump is caught in that. And many times the kingdoms are caught in that, where they think that you entered the Chakravyuh or the maze of allies, and you will come out of it. Always look for a window or a door. That is what Vidur said to Yudhishthir, that when you go and stay in a guest house, make sure there is exit. Since there was no exit, and Vidur knew it, therefore he made it underground way out. You see, these small little things, they are meaningful not only in corporate management, and that you take a decision spontaneously without thinking that if it doesn't work out, there is a way out. How to retract with dignity and grace, and you were happy that it was not the deadly end. It didn't turn out to be that bloodshed. So wars and diplomacy, their rules. So in Western countries outside of India, there are enemies and friends and neutrals. Chanakya added three more. Yana, those who are moving with you as allies in a campaign, war campaign. Yana is campaign, and they are with you. You are very sure because they are marching with you. Samshriya, they are your friends and equal to you. And then Dwadi, Dwadbha, that you pretend to be friends, but you are not. So those who are, you think they are your friends, but actually they are your enemies. So he added these three. The kingdom used as some kingdoms are used as intermediaries. And that's a good idea. But intermediary should be also somebody who is capable of thinking. A kingdom which is actually solid, or who has the best interests of both the parties, not like Pakistan is mediating between Iran and what is Pakistan? It's not a kingdom, it's not a state, it's a geographical area occupied by military. So, and it's a rogue country. If it is a country, it's a rogue. So, how can you put the fate of a major significant war of the century in the hands of Pakistan? Obviously, by now, if we listen, the talks failed. It is expected to fail. So Chanakya justifies warfare by deceit. That is called kut. Yudh. Only in cases where the enemy resorts to those kind of means. So, welfare state, nation state limits, can it be dissolved? Rights. So, replacement of the king, Kurajyam, European context, we have built all that. So, administrative hierarchy, rules and regulations, elaborate rules, you see, related to everything. For marriage, you get a license. Inheritance, you have to record. Property, movable, immovable, tax, sale, purchase, gifts, partnership, gambling houses, entertainment centers, just to mention a few. There were rules for all of them. So, and he also suggested that the Brahmins and the teachers and the uh, doctors should not be dependent on donations. They should be given monthly pension by the government. Separation of powers, almost there in the sense that the Raj Purohit was not was independent but not interfering. So to that extent, it was secular. Abundant treasury, espionage, at checkpoints, passports were seen, visa requirements. I mean, at the same time, there was grassroots democracy. The Chanakya state is not just a military state. It is a well-regulated, well-ruled, well-administered empire. Now, this is the nave of the power center. Nave is the part of the wheel which is in the middle, around which the whole thing moves. I forget the mechanical name. Axis? No, I don't know. Okay. So these are the allies. This is the center, Rajmandal. This is called Rajmandal. Satellite countries. This is the bigger one, satellite countries. This is the Rashtra. You are in the center, surrounded by the allies, in between Adivasi or republics, Janpadas, and then allies, you see, and you are spying on all of them. And this is a broader view of the thing, where outside of this nave and the concentric circle, there are foreign nations in blue. How to deal with them who come as marauders and they they fight with unfair means and they dismember the body, live body. Till this day, India has not figured it out how to get rid of them. Very simple. So this lesson is as important today for them as it was in Dharanand's time. European context, what did Plato say? What did Aristotle say? Both were fumbling with vague ideas. Ultimately, when somebody asks Plato, what is democracy? He says humdrum and fine talk. Dismiss. And people say Plato's Republic is the pillar of modern day democracies, Hellenic civilizations, heritage. Babylonian king, Hammurabi's draconian laws, eye for an eye, oral commandment passed on to the succeeding kingdom. What was the purpose? To control communities after they are conquered. How much can we theorize about political realities of those times just with cuneiform and hieroglyphics? Now they talk about Egyptian civilization. How do you figure out that? Just looking at the pyramids? We don't even know who made them. With cuneiform and hieroglyphics, you figure out political realities of those times. You see? So, about the Olympians, one person said about 5 stages of Greek religion. The most they ever did was to conquer it. And when they have conquered their kingdom, what do they do? Do they attend to the government? Do they promote agriculture? Do they practice trade industries? Not a bit of. They find it easier to live on revenues, blast with thunderbolts, and then they move on to the next conquest. That is exactly what Alexander was doing. He won Persia, defeated the king of Persia, left, came to India, then there the army revolted, he went back. On the way he died. He was only 26 years old when he died. Okay. So, and here people are talking about in history books, the Greek art and architecture left a permanent mark on the northwest provinces and kingdoms of India. And in the Google map, they have shown a huge area of Persia and India, Bactrian Empire. Bactrian. I still have not been able to figure out where did they get these ideas. But then this is what is being taught in history books, you see. So somebody has to bring and like take the glasses off and see the things for yourself. Delve into it. You see, you cannot just say things because somebody else said it. Cambridge history said it, or somebody made it up. So they they find it easier, and that is what was going on in Europe. Even what was colonialism, imperialism, mercantilism, everything was exactly. So Machiavelli wrote in the Prince that we did. Hobbes came. He said that state is empire is at the top and everything is under him. There is no such thing as allies and equals, participants. No. It is called Hobbes Leviathan because it is like a pyramid. Separation of powers, no. Locke said absolute power corrupts. So separation of power is there. But Hobbes said no. Then there is Spinoza. He was an interesting person. He was contemporary of Emerson from Boston. And he said that there is no divine book. The Hebrew book or Christian gospel, they are not divine. They are written by men of very ordinary ability. So he was kicked out of the Jewish community. And he said people have a right to liberty and liberty to believe in pantheistic powers, multiple powers. So right away he was affected by Emerson, Spinoza, Thoreau. They were all affected by Bhagavad Gita. So Locke's absolute power versus separation. Theories and actual practices. Now, in theory, you are having separation of power. But in actual practices, there is a discrepancy. The reality shapes according to the person who comes to power, how they interpret or how they ignore that kind of thing. What is happening in this country now is actually not sure whose domain is this function, this duty, whose domain is that function. It's all mixed up propaganda multiplied 100 times, million times by social media. And it is whatever you say gets so viral immediately that becomes a reality. So, as scholars and thinkers, and those who pledge to give better education, to judge for yourself, critically examine, and then make decision, that is what these lessons and the source books I have quoted, they're meant for. So what did they keep missing in European context? What did they miss? No policy document. Something like sutras and niti shastra, darshan shastra about right. No political theory and philosophy. Foundation of or framework of public policy and administration. That even doesn't exist today. So superstition and tyranny, the only guidelines of the ruling individual and elitist class. Censorship and intolerance cooperated with superstition to check the growth and spread of knowledge. So, and Hobbes, with absolute power of the government on the top, he agreed that a king should be intolerant about any kind of dissent. This is the situation of political science, political philosophy. This is from period of superstition, period of scholarship, will during. And then there was this from Machiavelli and Spinoza, I explained. These were the major figures they call the age of enlightenment. So Chanakya's vision, relevance of Arthashastra in modern geopolitics, it's not just a book of constitution in the modern sense of the word. It lays down rules of policy implementation, elaborate structure of administration. Larger goal of Chanakya was well-being of the subject. Dharma again is a major pillar. So intertwine the two issues. Now this is for us to figure out, because right now, should a philosopher be the king? Or a rational king becomes philosophic? Because what Chanakya was laying down, ultimate object is public welfare and dharma, protection of dharma. But at the same time, can a philosopher be the king without knowing practical realities or training to rule? So this kind of thing, Chanakya answer by itself is neither. One lacks practical wisdom and philosophic vision, and the other becomes a king who does not have experience and rationality. So, soft king is a recipe for natural disaster, and Raj Dharma is not a himsa for mother. That is absolutely no. And soft king, that is a bogus idea. And evolution of political theories and public policy in India. So, I made a tentative timeline, but these dates keep changing. So, here is Vashishta Raj Dharma that he taught to Sri Ram, Bhisham Niti, Vidur Niti, and 400 BCE, Plato and Aristotle, 330 to 315, then the Niti by Chanakya, and then he wrote Arthashastra by Chanakya. So this is the scenario for that. So one can make useless postures, but a leader should always focus on the integrity, indivisibility. Nehru was a fool distributing land, and Gandhi was the bigger one. Safety and stability of the nation, able leader and clean administration can provide it. So in Arthashastra, there is no disconnect between ideals, theory, reality. For what he advised, he also saw it implemented. For 40 years, he put those theories and ideas in practice. Thank you very much. It was a very long talk, and there was a lot of a mix of history and practical politics. They call it politics and science and the